So I wanted to come on here today and just share a perspective on pleasure and pain, right? The conventional paradigm of pleasure and pain bases the assumption on how pleasure is something that's bad, that we need to go through pain in order to find pleasure. We need to go through some form of grind. We need to go through some form of tough process or some kind of it's almost like this battle between, all the things that are good for us are actually bad and all the things that are bad for us are actually good, which doesn't quite make sense. And I've heard a number of times, and in various things that I've experienced, various people I've heard talk about pleasure and how what we should and shouldn't do in regards to pleasure. You can see Alfred is he's growing. His little arm, it's the only one that's grown is this one. It's actually quite ridiculous to me. And I think it's because people don't understand what pleasure is. Pleasure, and I'm pretty sure it even says this in the Oxford Dictionary, but if we just look at what pleasure is an experience that is to our satisfaction and joy, right? That doesn't mean that could be picking my toenail is pleasurable. That could be massaging the mirror if it is to my satisfaction and joy. There is no limit to what we can find pleasurable in that sense. Now, what people believe, right, is that we must stop doing pleasurable things in order to find something greater. But what that really means is that we must simply evolve what we find pleasurable. If I find all my life one particular thing pleasurable, to not do that thing and to do something else instead is going to seem like not pleasurable. It's just a different form of pleasure. For instance, if we just use an example, all our life we sought money, cars, fame, right? And that has been our form of pleasure. Then all of a sudden we realize money, cars, and fame don't bring me happiness. That is not to my pleasure anymore. Even though, it's probably quite fun, it's not to our satisfaction and joy anymore. So then we go to the temple and we go to a Buddhist retreat. Now, I'm sure that sitting in a Buddhist retreat, and I have, sitting in a Buddhist retreat isn't the same quality of experience as money, cars, and fame. But that is then the experience of being in the temple doing absolutely nothing is now to that person's satisfaction and joy. It is that then becomes the thing. Just because it isn't the other form of pleasure, it doesn't mean to say that it isn't pleasure. It's just what someone would rather be doing, right? So, with that being said, we don't necessarily have to go through a grindy process of doing things we don't enjoy. We should absolutely only be doing things we find pleasurable, if by pleasurable we mean to our satisfaction and joy. Everything we should be doing, nature is pushing us in that direction to literally find what is to our satisfaction and joy. Could you imagine living in a universe where the universe wanted you to find pain? If the ultimate goal of the universe, because that's what we're suggesting otherwise, could you imagine living in a universe where the universe had an agenda to help you find pain? Of course not. Everything we do, it's designed. Okay, I just had a phone call and it cut off the audio. Thank you, Aisha. I'm going to call you back. Where was I? The universe is not designed to push us into pain. Pain is there as a precaution for the direction not to go in. It's the reason why fruit doesn't taste pleasurable when it's rotten. It's the reason why banging our leg on the table doesn't feel good. It's the reason why not eating doesn't feel good. It's the reason why massaging our body feels good. It's the reason why exercise feels good. It's the reason why eating ripe fruit tastes good. It's the reason why sex feels good. It's the reason why all the things we need, eating, walking out in nature, all these things are pleasurable. Everything that we shouldn't be doing isn't pleasurable. It isn't to our satisfaction and joy. So just notice that fact, notice that nuance, because it's extremely important. Just because we're not doing the same form of pleasure doesn't mean that thing is pain. It's not pain. This idea needs to be taken out of our heads. Because in that case, we notice, and the most important thing here is to notice this. Pleasure is the direction we should be going in, but not in the way we think pleasure is. Pleasure is simply that experience that is to our satisfaction and joy. And if it is to our satisfaction and joy not to be playing video games, but to be sitting and meditating, which is quote unquote not as pleasurable, it doesn't. That the concept is just a load of, it doesn't make sense. There is no limitations to pleasure. In fact, when we notice something isn't to our pleasure anymore, and we notice that something needs to change, we are in that moment evolving our experience. And we do so by evolving what we find pleasurable. Now, the ultimate goal of this motion, if we just take it all the way down its route, is to find absolute satisfaction and joy in simply being alive. And that's what all the religious traditions and spiritual traditions and all the esoteric perennial backgrounds are trying to bring us to. To be simply satisfied, content, and at peace. In other words, to find pleasure in simply being alive.